This episode blew my mind. Okay, if you've heard of microdosing, this is not that. Ryan Meeks brings us on his own journey on how he became a healer and facilitator for high dosing psychedelics. We talk about the myths of psychedelic use, who is it for and who is it not for, and of course, how he used it for his own spiritual growth and healing. If you're new here, you're listening to the How We Get Thru podcast, a place for you to feel connected through deep and meaningful conversations with healers from all over the world. I'm your host, Jen, a licensed therapist and founder and CEO of the How We Get Thru app. And my mission is to bring you affordable and diverse therapy resources to help you get through the hard stuff, all in one place and at your own pace. Welcome to the How We Get Thru community. Hello, and welcome back to the How We Get Thru podcast. You guys, today we have a psychedelic edition, and I cannot wait. We have Ryan Meeks. He is a formally ordained minister turned psychedelic chaplain, and I just love that phrase, and we're so excited to have you.
Oh, thanks a lot. I'm just excited to be here.
Yeah. So usually we start the show off with a mental health myth, and we were talking a little bit before, and I would love if you can maybe clear up this microdosing, high dosing shenanigan. What is it? Give us some more information about that.
The difference between the two? Is that what you mean? Yeah, sure. I mean, it's probably, you infer a little bit right from the bat. So micro, meaning you're doing a small, what is often termed sub-perceptual. So you're not perceiving, oh, wow, I'm on a drug. It's a sub-perceptual dose. Now, it gets a little tricky because everyone has a different definition of what a microdose is. And that makes a little bit of sense, right? Because, you go out with your friends drinking, and one person is like, oh, let's do shots, and someone else is like, I'll be hammered if I do one shot, So part of that is the reason is what's sub-perceptual for who can be a difference. So, the general idea, though, is that you're taking almost like a supplement. And what this is doing is, you're shifting your state because of the way it interacts with your neurology. And that happens over time. So some people are on different sort of schedules with that. It would be like 2 days on, 2 days off, or maybe 3 days on, 2 days off. Paul Stamets has a schedule. James Fadiman, who wrote the Psychedelic Explorer's Guide, and who has really popularized, I think in many ways, you could credit him, at least in large part, for Western infatuation with the idea of microdosing. His is a different schedule, but that's the idea. It's a kind of supplementation. You're taking breaks. And it's sub-perceptual. High dose would be like the opposite. This is sort of the classic, I took a bunch of LSD, Alice in Wonderland, hippies, dropping acid or doing mushrooms, that kind of thing. Of course, in my setting, this would not be just recreational, which I'm not against, but what my wife and I do and sit for with people is these are high-dose, more therapeutic spaces for personal growth and spiritual deepening, awakening, things like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just becoming so popular. I think microdosing, from what I've heard, feels like maybe the therapist route or what they're getting trained in or whatever. So I just think it's so important because, again, I was telling you, like, I know nothing, but I know like a little bit, but I know nothing, and everyone's curious about it. And so I would love to know, like, how did you get here? Like, what... start at wherever you want in that journey, but how did you get to leading people in this way?
Yeah, well, I think it starts with my previous life. In our early 20s, my wife and I moved to the Seattle area and planted from scratch a church. We were in a Christian church, and blew our minds. It became like a large mega church, multi-site mega church. But inside, I was sort of falling out of faith. I was having all these misgivings with Christianity and my experiences traveling all over the world, and my relationships I was developing with people of different faith traditions and my friends in the LGBTQ plus community. I just started to realize that there's a lot of things that I have changed my views on, and I needed to come forward and explain those things. And so I started to do that very naively, I think, at first, thinking, oh man, I have so many liberating truths to share with people. Like, we can just love everybody and with no agenda, and we don't have to be afraid of hell. And
Isn't that
kind
nice?
of blew up. Yeah. I mean, it was great for me. I was like, hey, this is great news.
Seriously.
And that didn't go well, and a lot of fear and difficulty through that season, but it was great for us. Like, my wife and I, even though our life turned into a lot of chaos, we were in Time magazine. Like, it was kind of a lot of intensity, like death threats from around the world,
Wow.
I guess
From
in
Christian?
Jesus' name. Yeah,
Yes.
totally.
Yeah, sounds right.
So, but it's funny, as all that was just like burning to the ground around us, we were just so at peace, which hadn't been the case for many years, as I was like deconstructing internally and like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? I thought my wife was going to leave me, until we actually had a conversation, and it worked out great. But in order to deal with kind of the difficulty and the pain of that season, we went to therapy at a place called the Hoffman Process, Hoffman Institute in the Napa area, which is sort of like a residential therapeutic week that you do. And then opened up to, psychedelic use. My mentor at the time had said, like, you're ready to do, some psychedelics. And then that combined with, I had cancer. In 2017, I had Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so that's its own psychedelic experience. So this, its own death, burial, resurrection pattern that we went through. So I think all those things combined led us to a place where, we had exited formal religion. We had done a lot of therapy, gone inward. And then as soon as at least I'll speak for myself, as soon as I did a high dose of psychedelics, I was like, oh my God. This is everything religion promised me, but never delivered on. Like, I'm having a direct experience with what I would call God. And you can schedule it for a Tuesday afternoon. Like, how does this is insane. Have you guys been doing this all this whole time without me? Like, I was just like, how come people haven't dragged me here? And so the same thing with my wife. She did it shortly after me. And then we just did a hard charge, and we're just like, we're doing all the drugs we can this year, because we have not been exposed to this at all, and this is blowing our minds. And I don't recommend people do that. It's how we did it, but it was fruitful for us. But I can see a lot of problems with going down that road. But however you slice it, that's how we got into it, and we just have never been good at keeping our lives private. We've always been pretty public people. And so we're like, look, this is the truth. We do drugs. We've done a lot of them, and they have been transformational and beneficial in our relationship, in our marriage, in our parenting, in our spirituality, in our personal development, in our relationships with our parents. Like, we love this, and we cannot believe these things are illegal in a country that sells cigarettes and alcohol on every corner. Like, that's insane. So yeah, that's how we got into it. People started just reaching out and going like, hey, I'm interested. You seem relatively stable, 4 kids, all that stuff, but you do a bunch of drugs. Tell me more. Yeah. And so over the years, that sort of developed into like, we're helping a friend. We're helping a friend of a friend. And all of a sudden we're like busy. We're like, this is a full-time thing. And since it's an area of passion and I never tire of that energy, that's where we, put all of our efforts.
Wow. I love the story of both of you. I mean, it sounds like, individually and together, you guys go hard. Like, we're going to start a church, but it's going to be a mega church, So it just feels like a similar thing of like, this is so big for us internally. And then together, it just sounds like you guys moved at the same pace or desired to have it be big or be expansive.
Yeah, I think we get excited about stuff. Yeah. Well, and it was never the plan to have a big church. It was just like, oh, this works. And then same with psychedelics is like, this works. You should try this at least once. It's not for everybody, maybe, but imagine never seeing Hawaii. It's like, hey, you should check it out. Yeah, you might like it.
Oh my gosh, I love it. So during when you went hard that year, did you have a bad trip?
So that's a great. First of all, yes. There's a lot of language in the psychedelic world that I totally disagree with. One of those is that there's no such thing as a bad trip, only bad set and setting. And I disagree. I think that you can be ill prepared for a psychedelic journey. You can take the wrong dose for a psychedelic journey. You can have no guidance and support. You can have a great set and setting, which of course the set is your own sort of mental state that you're in, and then the space that you're in being the setting. Those are very important, absolutely. And I think a lot of what people call bad trips could have been mitigated by better set and setting. But I also think no support, not knowing what you're doing, getting a bad dose, having a bad or non-existent guide, those can all create I think the term is adverse effects. And these things are underreported. And in all the hype to get, this amazing healing thing out there, I think it's being overlooked a little bit, that people do have difficulty. And I think it's important to always talk about all the risks and who is not a candidate and what the contraindications could be and things like that. So
yeah, which is a good question. Like, who is this not for?
Well, I think first thing I would say is it's not for someone who doesn't want to do it. Like all this pressure. This is what I really want to leave behind in my old life of being an evangelical Christian. The idea of universalizing our own particulars. Like, this works for me, therefore everyone else needs to do it. That's a very evangelical, place to, speak from. And I no longer buy into that at all, at any level. Some things are good for some people, some things are good for many people. But the idea that one thing, especially just because it's been transformational for you, must be that for others is quite the projection. So who's it not for? Well, number one, it's not for someone who doesn't want to do it. Like, trust yourself. You're okay. You don't have to do this. There's lots of ways up this mountain. Secondly, most experts will say, bipolar, what's the word I'm looking for? Borderline personality disorder.
Mm-hmm.
People who are prone to psychotic breaks or have been hospitalized for these things. Now, having said that, it's not because we have all this data. It's not because we have all this science that shows that this is bad for these people. It's because the science we do have, where we actually get permission to do real science, like clinical trials and peer-reviewed and double-blind and all the rest of that, first of all, it's super expensive. So when they do that, they don't include those categories of people.
Right.
So we're just saying, like, look, our hypothesis is this could be destabilizing for people who are already particularly susceptible to feeling out of touch with reality. And I would second that. Like, I certainly think that as we explore potential benefits of psychedelics for particular at-risk groups, those people should be incredibly well educated on that specific thing. Like, I'm not the person to be like, well, let's give it a try on your bipolar or whatever.
Yeah,
that's dangerous. So I think just saying, like, there are categories of people or what you might call pre-existing conditions that might preclude someone from even once this goes full legal in certain spaces around the United States. I mean, MDMA is looking like it's getting FDA approval probably by the summer of this year.
Wow.
But in most cases, people are going to be told, and if they have those conditions, that this is not in particular safe for them. And then I think it's pretty clear that, like, the human brain is growing and up all the way up till like 25.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when children, I think we need to be having good, open conversations about, bodily autonomy and those kinds of things as it relates to parents and children. And, this gets sticky because there are indigenous communities that have been sharing psychedelics with their children, coming up. And so it's not just a sort of a Western imposition, like it's never okay to give children psychedelics. Well, there are cultures where this is a big part of the culture. So I guess I would just say, since I'm probably speaking to mostly Westerners through this, that in general, I just think it's best for children to avoid until a certain age. For sure, the age of, sort of personal accountability, whatever that feels like, as in our country, is kind of weird. You can die for us at 18,
right,
but you can't drink till 21. These are arbitrary nonsense, but these are categories to consider. Like, what does it look like for a child to become an adult and make the choice about their own consciousness. These things are powerful. So, I just think that's a category that's a gray area that we need to have good, heated debate on.
Yeah. And in your process, is there a whole like interview process of someone's stability mentally?
For sure.
Or
Yeah, absolutely. There's a long intake. We're asking lots of questions. Obviously, first thing is like, what meds are you on? Like, we can't mix things that create, first of all, serotonin syndrome, which can happen when people take classic psychedelics like psilocybin or LSD, for instance, and are on like Zoloft or Wellbutrin or some of these things. So not only does that block the effects of the psychedelic, but it can lead to, as I said, something called serotonin syndrome. It can be pretty hard on folks. So that's the first thing, contraindications.
Are there any physical things that a person can't have to do a high dose experience?
Physical things. Do you mean like physical disabilities?
Yeah, or any like, I don't know, because we just talked about the mental. I was just curious if there's anything.
Yeah, well, for sure, heart conditions is something to think about, because some psychedelics are going to definitely raise the heart rate, like blood pressure is a consideration. Some drugs reduce, your heartbeat. Some get it racing.
Right.
So it's important to find out, what's going on. Are you taking medication for your heart? Do you have a heart condition? Have you had a heart issue in the past? Surgeries? All of these kinds of things are considerations that we need to look into for sure. So yeah, there's biological, physical considerations, and there's of course neurological and psycho-emotional.
Pregnant or nursing.
Yeah, totally.
Think of all the things. Yeah,
totally. And some traditions, like I know that there are indigenous traditions that won't serve ayahuasca to women who are menstruating.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. That's curious. I'm curious about that. Okay, did you do a high dosing? Is this what it's called? High dose psychedelics. Did you do psychedelics when you were going through your cancer treatment?
That was the plan until I didn't really have enough information, but I was told, because I was going to do ayahuasca.
Okay.
And I was told, not only is there an incredibly restrictive diet leading up to the time when you take the ayahuasca tea.
Okay.
But if you're full of, let's say, even red meat, for instance, in your diet, ayahuasca can kind of punish you. You have to clean the body out first.
Oh, okay.
There's some traditions it's no salt. So now let's think chemotherapy was what was running through my body.
Right.
So they were like, it's a definite no-go. Don't combine this with your body being full of all these chemicals, because this could be really painful for you.
Yeah.
So I had to wait until I was finished with the chemotherapy, and then after that jumped in, and specifically to a high dose psilocybin journey first with my mentor, who had become at this point my therapist, and it blew my mind. I mean, it's kind of like the life before that and then life after.
Wow. How did that help you with your cancer journey? I'm curious of.
Well, I mean, first thing, obviously, the timeline you just heard, it was already over. So it was more retrospective in the sense of coming to terms with what I'd put my body through, how much my body had held over that time, being strong for my parents and my kids and my wife, and for myself, just trying to hold it together as I faced the uncertainty that comes with diagnoses like this. And so it was an opportunity for deep self-compassion, and also something that happens a lot for people on high dose mushrooms. There was this sense of deep knowing that it was all perfect. Being able to see the sort of cornucopia of gifts that had dumped into my life as a result of the difficulty, the suffering of that experience had shifted me in a way that I wouldn't want to change anything, because I so liked who I'd become as a result of the experience. And mushrooms makes that so apparent. It's just yes, I say yes to all of it. And getting that sort of 10,000 foot view of the time, the larger timeline, you can see it sort of unfolding in this beautiful, intentional process.
I'm hearing like gratitude maybe in a way
big time.
of like, yeah, like to take something that is traumatic or on your body, mind, soul, all the things, and really have a different perspective on it and have the gratitude around it, which is hard to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Even love, like, because to me, ultimate love is like not this emotional feeling, or it's full perception without judgment. So real love is like yes to reality. That's not fleeting. That's not a heart throbby thing. That's just like this. Yes, I'm not in resistance to it at all, and that's something that comes up again and again. And as we guide people in these sort of altered states of consciousness, is whatever we are in resistance to is what's exacerbating our suffering. Doubles our suffering. So yeah, just being able to say yes, because it's not like I was grateful that I had chemotherapy and a bunch of poisons running through my body. It was awful. I was so sick. I was so weak. I was so rail skin skeletal, and my hair was so thin, and my kids were terrified. My poor kids, my wife, it was so traumatic for her. So no, I'm not grateful for that.
Yeah.
But I can say like, it had happened, and I'm not going to push it off and like, okay, that was fucking hard. And yes, and all this beauty,
Yeah, I love that. What are the things that people come to you for? Like, what are the main things that you see?
Great question. So it's changed a lot, over the years. My wife and I have sat for over 500 individuals. And then, of course, we've had hundreds of our own journeys for ourselves. And I still don't do a deep journey without someone holding space. My wife and I take turns for one another. But it's changed. Early on is like, sort of daring explorers who are like, hey, I've heard about this and I'm interested in this. But now it's like so much has happened over the last 5 years that has popularized this conversation to where people's grandmas want to talk to me now. Where 5 years ago, it's like people are like, "You're a druggie," "You're a stoner" or something. And the world's certainly changed quite a bit on that. So I think what we see a lot these days, and I would say this is because of who we are. The old phrase, "Your vibe attracts your tribe." I don't think this is indicative of here's who comes to psychedelics comes to us. But we tend to specialize in a particular area. And that is people who are like, hey, my life's going well, but I just feel kind of stuck. They're not like, and we for sure have dealt with PTSD and sexual abuse and all this stuff, for sure, lots of that. But we tend to get a lot of people who are like, there's got to be more.
Like want to go higher.
Yeah. Or people who are like, oh, I transcended my childhood faith, and now I don't know how to put together a sacred worldview out of the rubble of this. And I don't know how to touch into whatever God is. And I'm like, hey, I get that.
Yeah.
It's like I walked that road and lost, all of that. And psychedelics has given me so much back. I mean, I think through cancer, I was probably ready to call myself an optimistic atheist. Like, hey, I'm happy to be here, and life is a gift, and let's just love each other as best we can. What a beautiful accident in the universe. And then I did high dose psychedelics, and all bets are off now. I've had, theophanies of beauty I can't describe, like intricate, ecstatic union with what people call the divine, I guess. I don't have any labels for it or knowing, other than these are experiences. They're not categories of belief. Do I believe in it or not? I don't know. It just happened. Like I made love to the Godhead. I don't know what to say,
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I want to know. I'm like, what did you see? Like, what is that experience? And it's going to be different for everybody else. But what I'm hearing you say is it detaches you, I think, from these rigid beliefs or what it should be like or what it has to be like or things that we have been ingrained in, whether you are really religious or not, right? We all have these kind of like sets of beliefs. I think heaven and hell is like the classic one. But when you're able to kind of experience and maybe be a part of your body? Do
Yeah,
you like
I think
go
that's
away?
a big part of it.
Yeah.
It depends on the
like,
drug. Some drugs are very much get in your body, like they pull you into your body.
Interesting.
Other drugs, like ketamine, for instance, is a dissociative anesthetic. So it's completely out of the body, especially at the higher doses. Like you go into just pure consciousness and just totally turned off in the body, completely off.
Wow.
So yeah, the answer is it depends.
I think it depends on obviously the person, but when would you want to be in your body and when would you want to be out of your body?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It definitely depends on the person and what they're working through. I mean, people who tend to be dissociative and that's their issue, ketamine might not be helpful. Also, ketamine is the one psychedelic that's legal in this country to go to a clinic for, and it's addictive.
Really?
So surprise, surprise, our government says yes to the one that's addictive, And I think it should be legal, by the way, legal. I think it should be legal. But so ketamine can offer people the very thing that some of the more frowned upon drugs in our culture that we use to dissociate from life, like heroin or alcohol, for instance, the drug of choice in our culture. We just need to be aware that can be addictive and can cause problems. But ketamine is also a beautiful experience, psychedelic experience, and can be incredibly healing.
Is there any drug you haven't done?
Yeah, for sure. Some
why?
of the more intense, like heroin, for instance, I haven't done heroin or...
Okay, good choice. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
No?
I would recommend to people Dr. Carl Hart's book called Drug Use for Grown-Ups. There's a lot of bad information that we got from the DARE program and the drug war that, a large percentage of heroin users are not addicted. That's not something that people are aware of. So again, you frame it always in the context of an alcoholic culture is saying these drugs are bad. And usually these are basically it's just racism institutionalized into some sort of let's pretend we care about the public's health. I mean, McDonald's everywhere. We certainly don't care about their health. We don't offer health care unless you work for the government and can vote down everyone else's health care. So the mythology that the government is out to protect people by making these things illegal is a bunch of bullshit. Having said that, I think it's important to know which compounds can be chemically addictive. Everything can be behaviorally addictive. People are addicted to Netflix. People are addicted to masturbation, None of these things are inherently wrong or immoral. It's just we should be aware that some compounds have literally a chemical addiction that you're just going to keep getting triggers for, and it can cause a lot of problems. So I tend to avoid drugs like that unless I know, I have a plan for here's how I'm going to deal with this. But frankly, the way I approach alcohol, I really don't drink that much. But once in a while, I'll have a glass of wine with my parents, but for the most part, I don't really like the way alcohol makes my body feel. Yeah. And I know it's for sure behaviorally addictive socially in our culture, and it's the number one drug that's causing problems in our culture, bar none. But yeah, I've done a lot of other drugs. Yeah. Quite a lot of drugs.
So where you're at now, I'm just so curious. When are you how often do you do psychedelics now? Are you on the weekend, I just want to let loose, or I want to connect to spirit, or are you just I'm really dealing with something, can we do it this weekend? What is your lifestyle like?
Yeah, great question. I think it ebbs and flows. There are some times when I'm doing something every week, something. And I'm all for human freedom. People like to talk about how we live in a free country. Yeah, right. But if we did, it would include freedom to experiment with your own consciousness, which we're not free to do with these drugs currently. So I'm all for recreational use, provided that people know what they're doing and they know how to be safe and not to hurt themselves or others, which again, when you have a prohibition-only stance, just like in the South regarding sex education, abstinence only, well, isn't that funny? That's where we have the most teen pregnancies. It doesn't work.
Yeah. Yes.
So fentanyl, everyone's dying of fentanyl. First of all, most of the deaths of fentanyl are a combination of drugs. If you die of like alcohol poisoning but had a tiny bit of fentanyl, it's going to go down as a fentanyl overdose.
Wow.
So there's a narrative that is needing to be pushed, and I'm not going to get into some conspiracy nonsense about it. It's just like, I just want to point out that the data is messed up. Depending, you can make up your own story about who's in charge of all that. We just need to know that the information isn't as clean as we think it is. So to your question, sometimes it's every week I'll do something, and then sometimes I'll go 2 months without doing anything. I want to just tune in. For me, using psychedelics drugs is about personal growth and increasing my experience of spirituality, which to me just means my capacity for being present to life and experiencing more love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, self-control, the things that my old tradition called the fruit of the spirit. I want to be a person who lives as a beneficial presence in the world and who has healthy relationships and can contribute more love. And psychedelics has helped me do that. So, yeah.
I love it. I'm like, when can I come see you?
Yeah, come down.
Which is
That'd be
another
awesome.
question. What do the sessions typically look like? Like, you just do one and done, or is it like a
Depends. Yeah, okay. It's just like everyone's personal journey through life. It's so unique. I've definitely had people who fly, from anywhere around the country, and they come out and they do one incredible weekend, and they are just changed. I get texts from people who we worked with 3 years ago, and they're like, it's my 3-year anniversary. I can't believe the life I have now. Beautiful.
Wow.
Then we have people who we work with every couple of months who are more like me.
Shit. Yeah.
Well, and yes, some folks who, for instance, people who have done consecutive journeys and have been working through PTSD and sexual trauma and things like that. And beautiful to watch the progression on those. But also people who are like me, who the first time they did it, they're like, oh my God, how far does this go?
Yeah.
How much more can I face myself? How much more can I let go? How much, it's a spiritual journey.
Yeah.
And that's fun too. When we meet people who kind of have that same hunger to go further, to touch the ineffable behind all of reality. So, it depends. We don't put people on a schedule.
Okay.
Ever. We're not like, this is what you need to do. We make recommendations of what kind of compounds might be most helpful for people. But most people who don't have experience, we think, you should start with something a little more gentle, like MDMA, which is not actually psychedelic, and or psilocybin. Those are great first-time places to begin. From there, it can get a little more intense, and like LSD is a 12-hour in your body experience.
Wow.
My first journey, I'm pretty sure, was 14 hours on LSD.
Oh my God.
So it's a long day, and of course, when you're thinking about if, let's just say, for instance, you tried to do a 14-hour therapy session, that's expensive.
Yeah.
They're going to have you sitting with them for 14 hours. So there are other drugs that are a little shorter and can provide similar stuff. I will say LSD is great for breaking through denial.
Wow.
So, which can be part of the reason it's hard. Yeah. What I would say that's in your body. It's definitely in the body still.
Yeah.
Because it's not endogenous to our bodies. So the body's trying to figure out for 14 hours or 12 hours-ish what's going on. But I would say you're probably tripping for about 6 to 8.
Okay.
But you're definitely still feeling it for a while afterward. So every drug kind of has that. There's the bell curve, the come up, then you're tripping, or what people call peaking, for a certain amount of hours. And then the come down, that's its own time zone. And then what I like to call the afterglow, which is sometimes the best part, where you're just euphoric about having gone through that harrowing, mind-blowing journey. And there's this sense of gratitude that comes online for who you are and what you faced and the love you've experienced. And so that's a lovely part of it as well. So so it depends on the person, depends on the compound. But I like to do at least one long session where we're talking about expectations, how the drug works, what to expect from us, and building rapport. Because to the degree that the person we're working with trusts that we're there not only to keep them safe, which is absolutely number one important, but then secondly, and not far under the first, is do you trust that we're here to fully accept you in loving compassion? And that
so beautiful.
is that's the hard thing to do. Even if someone wants to do that, we just so don't trust that we're enough, or that if we really revealed ourselves and our pain, so people worry, like, what I'm worried about what comes up and how I express that, and you're going to see that. And so that first, conversation, that first session over Zoom, or sometimes if they're local, we'll take a walk on the beach together. It's so important we'll talk through the important details, but I'm more interested in how does it feel to be with me? How does it feel when I look at you?
Yeah.
Do you feel safe? Like, it's making me tear up a little bit.
I love that.
Because, man, that's the heart of the work always, is if someone can relax their heart and keep it open and feel themselves being seen and taken in with total acceptance and non-judgment. So there's a lot of the healing that takes place is happening in the relational field between us, even though they're also doing a ton of stuff just internally on their own. And then of course there's the journey. Depending on the compound, it takes, like the shortest drug is like 30 minutes. The longest being, LSD, for instance. Or there are longer, what we don't work with, like iboga, for instance, which can be 24 hours.
Wow.
Really, really intense, hard drug, but great for addiction recovery, opioid addiction, things like that. And then we do what we call post-journey integration work, which is a session where we're talking about what now?
What the hell just happened?
Yeah. And not from the sense of like, let's now explain it, which is so masculine, so Western.
Yeah.
Like, we need to name everything and decode the message.
Yeah. I love that.
That's not what psychedelics are, folks. It's a marinade. It's a hot tub you sit in and you let this shit work on you. Kind of like dream work. If you get a good Jungian analyst who does dream work, it's not about coming to the correct interpretation of the dream, right? It's about letting that dream work on you. And over time, layers of meaning, just like myths. There are layers and layers and layers of opening and confrontation that legends and myths offer us. So too the dream world, so too this sort of Pandora's box of the unconscious that we open up through psychedelic journey work. And then how do we ground some of the takeaways in our life? Because we've opened a window of plasticity. That's what we know neurologically now. Right? There's a lot we don't know about psychedelics, but we do know that one of the things that happens is that we open a window of plasticity. So if we capitalize on that, people can make significant changes in their life. But if we don't, and this is where people, I know somebody who did like 9 ayahuasca ceremonies and they're still an asshole. Well, psychedelics, that's not the psychedelics' fault. Any more than the person who goes to a Vipassana retreat once a year who also is still a jerk. It's not the Vipassana's problem. Like, our own willingness to integrate and to do the work. Yeah. Which is also an empty phrase these days. But what I mean by the work is to take action. Yeah. On and be open learnings to it. Yeah. And make changes. Like, things need to change as a result of, in some senses, I know that maybe I don't buy into the magical worldview so much, but I do like the idea that these compounds, as soon as you decide to come to them, they look right at you and they're like, if we give you what you're asking, will you do it? Yeah. Yeah. It's like, you need to take this seriously. Yeah. If we open reality to you, will you be accountable for these gifts or not? I think this is an important question.
Shit, yeah. I need to sit with that one.
Yeah.
Because have you ever denied anybody? not
Yeah.
for physical, not for mental,
Yes.
but like you're not open to this. Like you
Absolutely have denied people because of either a misfit. Like I have to feel in that first session, can I authentically love you? And I'm not saying that's a defect of them, it's like there might be a projection going on, some transference where you're reminding me of someone that's like, oh, I don't think I care enough about you to not put you in a situation where, you're not going to be cared for adequately. That's very rare where I've been in a situation where someone just kind of has rubbed me the wrong way the whole time. And I'm like,
something's here.
it's rude. It would be rude of me to be like, pay me to take care of you. You irritate me. So
yes. Yeah.
That rarely happens. It's what's really cool about human beings is it does. If you try, there's so many reasons to love people.
Yeah.
And what I love most about this work is this is like naked, raw, vulnerable work. And so the truth that we've come to know is that when you get inside the real depths of someone, all people are just the most beautiful, tender spirits that are just longing for love. And that's so beautiful. So number one is like, okay, I have to make sure that I can honestly love them. And then, of course, I've said no to plenty of people who I didn't feel had the psychological stability to handle being destabilized for a while.
Yeah.
Psychedelics destabilize you. That's why they work. The reason we feel stuck is we're so stable in our dysfunction because we know it. We're in love with it. We're in love with the devil we know. And psychedelics will destabilize you, I think, in the best way. But psychedelics are not a joke. It's not another pill to sort of reduce symptomology. This is like, do you want to look at the truth? Do you want to feel reality? Sometimes it's okay to answer no to that.
Yeah. But I think it's a good question. I think it's like honest and raw and asking them to look and make that decision for themselves, because you're like, this is what I'm offering you and this is what you can offer yourself. Here's if you're really ready, let's do this. And if you're not, that's okay. Then this isn't the right time or whatever.
Because, and this is so, I probably said it already, but I try to say this in any interview.
Say it again. I don't know if you said it.
Psychedelics are not the only way to heal. They're not the best way to heal. Like some people, Zen saved their life. For other people, it's their church. For some people, it's, a meditation group or walking in nature, or it's their wonderful therapist who they've done EMDR with for the last 3 years. Or like whatever. It's like psychedelics is a modality. It's a very interesting and fast-track modality if done right. But I really reject the idea that it's the end-all be-all of the therapy world. For sure. For sure. You can do it another way. We can do it another way.
And that's what I believe too. I mean, with like years of being a therapist, I'm always like, okay, go see this person because they do this. Go see that person because they do that. Because I can't be trained in all the things and I don't want to be. So part of it is like asking yourself, what is the next thing for you, or what else, or what is this not meaning for you, especially in traditional therapy? What can I not offer you that somebody else could offer you? Or what are you excited about? Or what are you wanting to experience that isn't here? There's limitations to everything, right? And limitations that we put on ourselves. So I think when you talk about psychedelics, it's just like this expansion, like this just like
yes, for
destabilizing, bigger, out of body, sometimes in the body, but just, I think that's why I want to go. I've been on a spiritual journey these last few years and I've done a lot of healing, and I'm just like, I want more, I want like a bigger connection in that way. And I'm sure there'll be healing in that in a lot of ways and stuff will come up. It's just like really, really fascinating. And you also mentioned something before we got on, this idea of microdosing and then high dosing, what you do. And again, it just like talks to the seriousness or it's a big deal. This isn't just a vitamin, like you said. Like this is a big deal with big change. And really, again, because I think people be like, oh yeah, I want that. But no, do you really want that?
Yeah. Right, because it's not going to leave you. Like one of the ones I talk to people about is, there's a story in the Judeo-Christian tradition where this guy Moses is like begging God to show himself to Moses, and God says, "You can't handle the truth." Yeah, he's like, "I'll let you see my back as I go by, but that's all you can take." And I'm like, that's my experience specifically of a compound called 5-MeO-DMT. It's like catapults you 3, 2, 1, God, or whatever God is.
Yeah.
It's just like union with everything. And that means everything, like birth, death, sex, orgasm, murder, waterfalls, laughing, Mozart, like it's just everything now, like all the keys on the piano. And
wow.
Yeah, and it's impossible to describe, but that's my attempt. And
that's good.
If you think you can look God in the face and walk away unchanged, you're not thinking it through, is kind of how I like people are like, oh, I want change, but they want change they can control.
Yeah.
I just want like a little bit better communication with my spouse. Great. There's lots of ways to do that.
Yeah.
But you can fundamentally shift your self-concept on these compounds, which I think is a beautiful opportunity. But you need to know sometimes what happens, and this is true, I'm sure you see this all the time, as people just heal in therapy, it can ruin their marriage.
Yeah. Yeah.
One person starts to get healthy enough to be like, no to this behavior, no to it. And so getting better and, healing and all that kind of stuff can make your life harder, actually, for a while, at least.
Yeah.
That's true of psychedelics as well.
They talk about that, like, on the spiritual path, like, and they have some shit with that. Like, it doesn't always have to be hard, right?
For sure it doesn't.
Sometimes change comes with shedding things that no longer fit you, and those could be hard decisions and hard things to face.
Absolutely. Life is hard enough. We don't have to create difficulty to grow.
Yeah.
I promise you, life will bring you some shit you can work on.
Yeah.
Like let's try to grow as much as we can through love and beauty and gentleness. And that's for sure a hallmark of our paradigm is we're not interested in giving people these intense, overwhelming doses. We're like, as little of the drug as possible to still be in the high dose so you're getting the real thing. I compare sometimes microdosing and full dosing as like, look, you could like get a kiss on the cheek or you could make love. Like, what do you want to do here, right? One of these is the real thing. And it's fine if you just want to kiss on the cheek, but that's not what we're doing. Like, we want to go all the way with you. And so just to say that, like, we had to be ready for that kind of full-on experience and willing to let go into it.
Yeah. I'm so curious, how has it changed yours and maybe some of your clients as far as their like sexuality, sensuality? Because you've kind of hinted a little bit throughout the ways. And like, what do you think? I mean, obviously coming from Christian viewpoints of all of
Repression.
Yes.
Yeah.
But like, what are you seeing people experience, or what have you experienced in that?
I mean, wow, so much to say there.
Tell me more.
I mean, it's life energy runs through us, and and no matter what you believe about the energy systems of the body or the central core or what people call the chakra system, I'm not married to any of these maps. The map is not the territory, but there's some sense of like root to crown, pelvis to the top of the head, energy flow. I would have said bullshit to all this stuff, except that I've had non-drug and drug experiences that now I know it's a thing. Like I've had I was just sitting down on a couch at one point. I just had this diamond light. My eyes were wide open, but all I could see was diamond light running through the center of my body and going out the top of my head. And I was having a full body orgasm, just going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my, for a couple minutes. And then after it let go of me or whatever, I don't know what it was, I just started weeping because I was just being washed with unconditional love. So now I know that can happen not on drugs. I didn't know that was possible. I had that experience on
the same
5-MeO.
one?
Yeah.
With the diamond light?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I've read like all these esoteric texts and different, like Kundalini specifically seems to speak to it more than other traditions. Although there's definitely, that's a sidebar. So I guess all that to say, as we get in touch with the body more and more, and life energy, which is what sex energy is just life energy, is creative force energy. The whole world is trying to fuck itself, right? I mean, springtime, it's just like everything is alive and wanting to connect, and these are normal things. Once you get through the deconstruction of maybe some religious suppression and repression and the sort of stigmatization of all things feminine, then we find freedom in the beauty and sensuousness of being in a body. And life energy, sex energy, is just a beautiful part of feeling alive. And so people have had, for sure, orgasms, just rolling through their bodies through psychedelics, because what's holding us blocked tends to be related to the ego, and tends to be related to the personality structure that's there as a coping mechanism for keeping us safe. So we learn not to be authentic and to shame our bodies, or to hide ourselves, or to not feel. And psychedelics is wants to take all that off. It's get in your body, what I mean? So, I've seen, from the wild side of somebody having a 3-hour orgasm to my own experiences, both drug and non-drug. I know my wife would speak to having all of her categories just obliterated, like mental categories about sexuality and gender and all of that, just obliterated by psychedelics. And
How
then
beautiful.
just this being able to experience the freedom of that sexuality is such a beautiful part, an essential part. If we're not expressing and allowing ourselves to just be sexual because we're human, rather than I need to find a relationship so I can start being sexual. Walking on the street, you are you're sex walking around, right?
That's
we're
right.
all creations of a sexual act, all of us. So I think psychedelics helps, one, deal with the mental ossification, conditioning of our upbringing and our sort of our culture, which is so weird. It's sex obsessed, but not sexual fluency at all. It doesn't know how to have sex. It's all this friction based mutual masturbation, and then there's real spiritual connection and making love. Just not a lot of crosstalk between those two things. And then of course a lot of dissociation from the body because of sexual trauma, and there's so many people have been sexually abused. So a lot of healing in that sense, and a lot for sure, especially drugs that get you in your body. That's where you see a lot of stuff come up. Somatic
That's
releases
so cool.
and cathartic letting goes.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
The real fun is when you get to a place where you're comfortable with psychedelics and you can find the dose that works for you and a partner. And then to have sex together on psychedelics can be the most ecstatic, out of body, amazing. God.
Can
to me, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, those are the 3 pathways to God. If you can put those together, rock and roll music, I think, once you put those 3 things together, it's
they're onto something.
For sure.
Okay, what happens when you have sex when you're not on psychedelics? Are you this sucks?
Yeah, it's so funny. People say that, oh, it's going to ruin it or whatever. I'm I totally disagree. It's different kinds of sex. There's so many different, it's oh, I went out to a great restaurant, I'm never going to want to eat again. That
stupid. Is a very good analogy.
Right? It's you're going to, I don't know. I think that if you're using drugs to hide the fact that you're having sexual dysfunction in your relationship, then you're probably not going to like it as much when you're not on drugs. But that's not the drug.
I get it.
That's the way you're utilizing it, And so I hope that, utilizing the drug in sexual relationship is about taking the relationship deeper and further and more vulnerability and more
connected,
open, just fucking raw, heart to heart. If we're gonna cry at the end of this, that's sex to me. The deeper levels of real deep spiritual partnership. You're not gonna be oh, it's dumb if we don't have sex. You're gonna be what's next, you infinite, endless mystery, Oh
my God, it's so beautiful. I love it. Well, Ryan, I'm very excited for our session coming up.
Yay, me too.
Yes, but I really appreciate you coming on, and I just love your perspective of things. And your own journey. And again, like, I mean, I'm a therapist because I have my own fucked up trauma that I've like continue to heal, right? And so
Sure.
these things that we become guides and healers out of our own stuff. And I love that you lead with that, because there's a lot of grounding, humility, and openness, and just real humanness in that. And then also pushing yourself spiritually, pushing yourself relationally, expanding, having other people expand. I'm just like, I'm all about it. Right, guy.
Wow. Well, thank you. I received that. That feels so good to hear. It's certainly, it's certainly who I want to be in the world, for sure.
It's who you are.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Ryan, tell people where they can find you. We'll also put this in the show notes. How can they work with you?
My website is loveisthepoint.com. Also ryantmeeks.com goes to the same place. And then my wife and I have various offerings that we do on there that you can, but psychedelics, of course, sitting for people on psychedelics is there. I always mention, because of the legality, obviously these are Schedule 1 substances and totally illegal. Obviously that's going to change with the MDMA this summer, but we just make it really clear we don't sell psychedelic drugs. So that's important for us to say legally safe.
We're slinging drugs over here.
Yeah, so I got to order up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Just there, and we're on Instagram as well. It's not as easy to get a hold of us there. Well, she probably get a hold of her pretty well, but the website would be best.
Okay. And then, can you work with anybody? Like, are you only working do people have to come fly to you? Like,
most of the time people are coming to Encinitas. We do stuff first virtually as well, and then because our adult children live in the Seattle area, we're actually up in Seattle almost every other month. So we usually do a full weekend or week there, whenever we're there of work.
Yeah.
So those fill up fast because we don't live there currently. So, but yes, we're kind of a lot of West Coast stuff as well. But otherwise, we're down here in Encinitas. Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Yeah. Well, thank you, Ryan, so much.
Yeah, thank you. This was super fun. Hopefully that was helpful.
So great.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in. This episode was just so much fun, and it was so interesting. And I hope with every guest that I bring on, you are able to kind of sort through what resonates for you and what doesn't. So thank you for being here and listening as we discover new ways of healing together. And lastly, if you are loving what you're hearing, please give us a review up on Apple Podcasts so that we can continue to reach and help other people. We'll see you next time.